Hey everybody, this is Joe Bartnick and welcome to the Bert Sugarman Midnight Special Podcast. We are so happy to be here again. Of course, we are building a community on this channel where we're telling stories and we're reliving the greatest music of all time, all captured on the Midnight Special. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host, the great Mike Nell.
Nice to be here. Happy to see you.
Great to see you. And we have a special one this week. One of the architects, one of the godfathers of rock and roll, Mr. Chuck Berry. I mean, the Beatles, the Stones, they all look back and they say Chuck Berry is their major influence. When Keith Richards met Mick Jagger, he was holding a Muddy Waters and a Chuck Berry record in his hand. Both those guys are on this episode that we're going to review, which is episode 40. But right now, let's just talk about Chuck. You know, he basically invented rock and roll as far as like mixing the country and the blues into this. Just so much fun. You got to dance with Chuck Berry, as you can see on the episode. And he wrote songs about teen life and consumerism. And it was all showmanship and guitar solos and just so much fun. Let's just hop right into the episode, Mike.
Yeah, no one can sit down when Chuck Berry's doing his thing. Like, it's impossible.
I can't even sit down in this chair. I'm shaking my buns.
Well, we want to talk about you guys first, since you guys support us and everything we do. We want to start with some of the top comments from our Gordon Lightfoot episode. From Dwayne Lady K. This was a fantastic podcast. Gordon Lightfoot and his band were very friendly when I met them after a show and I saw them live. I also saw Randy Bachman 8 times live and met him. I saw Burton Cummings 4 times live and met him. It was pretty cool to see the images of the space shuttle. One of my relatives is an astronaut. He and his brother are in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Well, man, last episode was the episode for you. I mean, you got to see all of the people that you've seen a million times. You got to see the space shuttle. What else do you need?
I mean, this guy's mega Canadian.
All right, up downstate. I saw Lightfoot at Saratoga Performing Arts Center. SPAC for those who can no longer remember.
SPAC.
In 73, and he scolded me from the stage. He seems like the type who would correct some bad energy. He does a good performance, and it was getting near the end, so time was running out. I ran down front and called, "Play Daylight, Katie." He lost his shit. He yelled at me and said this was his concert, and he chose the songs to do, not the audience, and a few other things about being a bad person.
Yeah, that's one thing I've always noticed that triggers musicians. They don't like to be told what to play. They're not jukeboxes, Mike. They're human beings.
And DJs. Your requests come with tips. So, in honor of Chuck Berry, our old school cool photo of the week's near and dear to my heart. It is a screen grab of him doing the duck walk and Michael J. Fox re-impersonating his performances in Back to the Future.
Well, this is near and dear to my heart, the duck walk, because, you know, it was also commandeered or took over by Angus Young. That's his move. And if you remember from episode 1, AC/DC is one of my 2 or 3. They're number 1. Well, them are the Stones, but you know what I mean. I love it. You know, Chuck started doing that when he was like 3 years old when he was a kid. He was brought to the stage. If we're talking about showmanship, no bigger showman than Chuck Berry.
Yeah, and I think he was picking it up from T-Bone Walker.
Oh, yes. You know, T-Bone, as we talked about on many episodes, he's one of the he's one of the origins of rock and roll. It's guys like Chuck Berry that kind of took from T-Bone and Muddy Waters that made rock and roll.
Well, my origin story was seeing Michael J. Fox do it. And you couldn't have told me he wasn't playing guitar when I saw this movie as a young child. And getting to have the musical soundtrack of Back to the Future brought us back to so much of this music. And it was the perfect time machine segue to get us back to November 2nd, 1973.
Whoa!
See what I did there. During this time, John Lennon had just released Mind Games, and Ringo Starr released Ringo through Apple Records.
It's so funny, like it's like Mind Games, like John Lennon's playing Mind Games. Ringo's just Ringo.
Yeah. Also this week, Barbara Streisand did Streisand and Other Musical Instruments on CBS.
It probably had a little, like, I love the old graphics from the 70s, before your time. Ooh, it's special. Like we'll be singing right now with like Charlie Brown Christmas. Like, ooh.
Yeah, and I'm sure they were competing with things like the Midnight Special because they saw all the success Bert was having. They're like, what musical programming can we get up? We need something in competition with this.
Absolutely.
Well, the number one song in the country at that time was Gladys Knight and the Pips' Midnight Train to Georgia.
Such a great song, and Gladys was a mainstay on the Midnight Special. We got to get one of the Pips has to come on the podcast.
Absolutely, and you can see her throughout the years on so many episodes, and you can see Midnight Train to Georgia at least perform twice on the show because it was a staple.
And then there's a sketch with the Pips.
Yeah, they had
With
so
Richard
much
Pryor.
talent. The amount of things that group could do. I mean, I think if they weren't a singing troupe, they could have been a comedy troupe. That family, they can do what they want.
The Pips were related? They were family?
Yeah, Gladys was the sister, and she had an older brother in the group. And then I think throughout time, they had some other people in and out of the band over the years. But yeah, they were a family group.
That's great. It's like, sister, can you get me in the band?
You better know how to dance.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, the number one song in the UK was Daydreamer or The Puppy by David Cassidy.
David Cassidy is Keith Partridge, for those that don't know, from the Partridge Family. I don't know if that's before your time.
Another family band.
Another family band. And Sean Cassidy, his younger brother, was a heartthrob. Not that David wasn't as well, but now I'm giving away family secrets. I had a Sean Cassidy record when I was a little kid. The do run, 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 the do run, run.
Well, I was an only child, so I guess I never had a shot at being a musician. Like, no brothers for the Bee Gees, no family to dance with, no nothing.
Right. Well, you could have been a solo artist.
Yeah. Guess we did Gordon Lightfoot. I could have had a guitar and just me. And
exactly.
I
12 string.
Yeah. And the number one film at the box office was a re-release of the independent feature Billy Jack.
That's very independent. I have no idea what movie that is.
I had to look it up because seeing that it was an independent feature, and I love movies, and that's my background and everything, it was kind of a Rambo vibe before Rambo.
Oh, really?
But it was a Vietnam veteran who was defending a small kind of hippie culture town from a rich group of people, and in the end, he kind of had to be a martyr in a way, and defend and be arrested under the promise that the school would still be allowed to go on for 10 more years. That was the plot points that I read up. But yeah, it seemed very hippie Vietnam movement.
Was Billy Jack played by a famous actor or one who became a famous actor?
Tom Laughlin.
Yeah. Do not know who he is. Doesn't mean he didn't have a great career.
He was Billy Jack, starring Dolores Taylor.
That's what happened. He couldn't shake that character. Everyone say, "Hey, that's Billy Jack."
Yeah,
nice jean jacket on Billy Jack, I might add.
Yeah, it was the number one movie though, so someone's seen it.
Yeah, what happened?
Yeah, let us know in the comments. Do I need to get out the old projector and find this movie?
Yeah.
All right, well, let's dive into some Chuck Berry facts. One of the early facts about Chuck, growing up, he went to reformatory school for stealing a car with a broken gun. And while he was there, he formed a quartet with 3 other inmates, and they were so good they were allowed to go play outside of the detention center.
You know you got talent when they let you leave jail.
Yeah. All right. He also studied at the Poro School of Cosmetology founded by Annie Turnbow Malone, and he bought a 3-bedroom house with the money he made from that.
Yeah, the house is now in the National Registry as the Chuck Berry House. But that's his first house, a little three-room house. His last house was a mansion on they called it the Chuck Berry Estate. It had a pool shaped as a guitar.
Nice.
Yeah.
Which type of guitar?
I think the famous one, right? The Gibson he plays?
Yeah, because that Gibson guitar is now in the Museum of National History, the Smithsonian.
Wow.
Yeah. You know you shred when your guitar gets recognized like that.
Well, you know that, is it a later fact? But, Chuck is really known in outer space because his song, Johnny Be Good, was actually put onto the Voyager Colony Golden Record that they shot into outer space, which is like passing through the cosmos right now. So when the Martians pick it up, they're like, it's the only rock and roll record on there. It's Chuck Berry.
They'll be like, I thought that was Michael J. Fox. Well, early in Chuck's career, Leonard Chess of Chess Records put out his first smash hit, Maybelline. But if Chuck had it his way, it would have been on the B side, and Wee Wee Hours would have been released instead.
Wee Wee Hours is an incredible blues song. It just drips soul. But Maybelline is a country rocker because it was originally he reworked the old country staple song called Ida Red.
Yeah, that country and blues mixed together to make rock and roll. You really hear it, and that's where he's got that factor.
Well, it's funny because he went to Chicago just to meet Muddy Waters because he loved Muddy so much, and Muddy's like, and he went to learn what to do, and he goes, "I'll take you to Leonard Chess." And that's Leonard Chess is like, "Hey, you're good. Let's put out an album." The rest is history, as they say, Mike.
Yeah, well, on that Maybelline record, he saw Allan Fred's name on it, and he had to sue to have it removed because he wanted all of the ownership for himself.
Yeah, he finally looked at the record and goes, "Who's Allan Fred? Why is his name on my record?" He sued him, won in court, but let bygones be bygones because Allan Fred was the biggest rock and roll DJ in the country. He ended up going on Allan Fred's tours through the late 50s where he met his great friend Carl Perkins, and they another pioneer of rock and roll. So, Chuck was always good for a buck. I'll see you and I'll go on your tours.
Well, during that time, Chuck had dozens of singles on the charts, including Roll Over Beethoven, School Days, Rock and Roll Music, Sweet Little 16, and, of course, the aforementioned Johnny Be Good.
Yeah. Johnny Be Good was actually Johnny Johnson, his piano player who he originally played with before he became a solo artist in the Johnny Johnson Trio. And in the year 2000, Johnny Johnson sued Chuck and said, "Hey, I wrote most of these songs with you, and why don't I get a piece?" I don't even know if it was settled out of court or not. But
Well, you guys will have to look that up and let us know in the comments what happened with that lawsuit.
But isn't that kind of like a little interesting fact that Johnny Be Good wasn't a guitar player? He was playing the piano like a ring and a bell.
Well, everyone was trading stories and stealing music because so many people stole Chuck's style back then that he was blocked from getting the #1 spot on the charts for years. And then he finally reclaimed the #1 spot with a very naughty song called My Ding-a-Ling.
Way to just hit the nail on the head, Chuck.
Yeah, my mom told me she knew that song when I was talking about Chuck Berry, and it made my jaw drop a little when she told me the lyrics.
Well, what's funny is like keeping him from the charts, the top of the charts were the Beatles and the Stones, and they were covering Chuck Berry the whole time.
Right. Yeah, Keith Richards is quoted saying, "I lifted every lick he ever had played." Keith also inducted him into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
I also think that Keith got punched in the face by Chuck because he touched Chuck's guitar one time.
Don't touch Maybelline.
Don't touch Maybelline. And also, it was either Keith or John Lennon that said if rock and roll had a different name, they would just call it Chuck Berry. And also in the great movie Hail, Hail, Rock and Roll, if you're a rock and roll fan or a Chuck Berry fan, you got to see this movie. There's a place where Chuck shows Keith how to play one of the licks. I think the lick to Maybelline, the little he doesn't do it quite right. I'm not going to be able to do the sound effect, but and then Keith nodded his head like, "Yeah, that's the way you do it, Chuck."
Yeah, being corrected. Like, you're one of the best guitar players of all time, but you still have to sit there and take your medicine, as Chuck Berry tells you. That's not right. That's not right.
When you're inducted in the inaugural class of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and you're number 5 artist of all time, according to Rolling Stone, and the number 2 guitarist, even Keith Richards has to listen to you.
Yeah, Keith Richards, are you number 1? If you're not number 1, you have to listen to number 2.
Yeah.
He was also invited to play The White House by Jimmy Carter in 1979.
Isn't that incredible? I mean, Jimmy Carter just rocking out.
Yeah, one of the millions of places he's played, because even through the 80s, he was playing over 100 shows a year.
Yeah, and the thing that he would do is he would not bring a band. He would just bring his guitar and expect a local band in town to just know. They would never even rehearse. He would just show up on stage because basically he knew that every kid growing up knew how to play Chuck Berry songs.
If you go somewhere that they don't, it's trouble. But if you didn't know it and you were from St. Louis, then it's real trouble, because in St. Louis, there's a 8-foot statue of him on Blueberry Hill.
I think that's fantastic. And he's such a big part of St. Louis that when he passed away, at 10 o'clock, the day of his funeral, 10 o'clock at night, every bar in town toasted the great Chuck Berry. And Gene Simmons was in town that day because he showed up to the funeral. He gave an impromptu eulogy. That's how much Chuck Berry is rock and roll. his Kiss. He touched Kiss.
I just imagine him showing up late to the funeral with the guitar. Just you hear a note in the distance, and everyone turns. And who's that? Yeah, that's Gene Simmons playing a solo as he approaches to give the eulogy.
Well, what's funny is they probably thought, "Oh my God, he came back! The devil came back!" Oh God, he's dressed up.
Don't let him take Chuck. It's the Grim Reaper.
Yeah. And now, Gene's playing the bass too, so like boom. It's like it sounds like the gates of hell opened up.
All right, well, let's get into some of the memorable performances from Chuck on the Midnight Special. So his first appearance was September 7th, 1973, when Mac Davis hosted, and he performed Roll Over Beethoven, Bio, and Carol.
You know what's interesting about that performance is the bio section, because he's basically playing Chuck Berry licks, and he's telling his life story, and he talks about how Muddy Waters changed his life, and you know how much I love Muddy Waters, so it's just a great piece. And of course, Carol, Roll Over Beethoven, everything Chuck touches is just amazing stuff.
Well, he got to touch the Bee Gees when he returned because he hosted the Bee Gees, I should say, hosted October 12th, 1973, and they did duets of Reelin' and a Rockin' and Johnny B. Good with Chuck.
You know what's funny about Reelin' and a Rockin' is it can get a little spicy. So it's fun seeing the Bee Gees get a little spicy.
Yeah, and Chuck only plays that way with the tight pants. He's got it all going on when he's on stage. He also performed Maybelline and Sweet Little 16 on that show.
Yes, sir.
Then his next time on was when he finally got to host, and he hosted the Midnight Special on November 2nd, 1973, and was joined with Fleetwood Mac, Rick Derringer, the Edgar Winter Group, Sean Phillips, Johnny Taylor, and of course, Muddy Waters.
You know, I think we've done 7 or 8 of these shows, and every week I get more blown away by which ones I like more. Like I love BB's episode. It was the blues episode. This so far has been my favorite one. This absolutely shreds people. First of all, you have Chuck Berry just blowing it out of the water. Then you have Edgar Winter doing Free Ride. And if you know Edgar, it's the most rocking. He's got more soul in him, and he's whiter than Elmer's glue. And he's his famous brother Johnny, the guy who wrote Frankenstein. So much soul in two brothers who couldn't be any whiter. Then you have Fleetwood Mac. This is pre-Stevie Nicks and Lindsey Buckingham. This is Peter Green, rock and roll, bluesy Fleetwood Mac. And then, of course, then Edgar teams up with Rick Derringer, and they do rock and roll Hoochie Coo. Are you kidding me? I mean, this just blows it up on NBC. But to top it all off, he brings the guy who started all for him, the great Muddy Waters. And I watch a lot of Muddy. These two performances of I Can't Get No Grind In and the infamous I Got My Mojo Working are vintage Muddy Waters. And he's got the harmonica guy. He's got the piano going. This episode, if you don't get up and shake your buns, I don't think you're alive. I mean, this is the episode.
And one of our super fans let us know with his commentary about what was going on in the audience.
Chuck Berry is a total and thorough professional. When Chuck came to the Midnight Special, we never worried if he'd be late. He was always on time, or much of the time early. He was ready to go, knew the lyrics to what he had to sing. Just a total professional, as well as a wonderful human being. I enjoyed his company so much. I enjoyed his talent so much. And I'm a great fan of Chuck Berry. When Chuck was on stage, our audience went crazy. Standing, jumping, dancing, singing. Chuck had a hold on a live audience, and boy, did we appreciate that.
Yeah, I love to hear from Bird about his memories of the artist and hearing that Chuck Berry was always a professional for the Midnight Special and showed up just like everyone describes him, had his guitar, ready to rock, gets it done like a businessman, and is out.
Yes, absolutely. And he put on a show. I know because a lot of times when we think, how can these kids be sitting down? Not with Chuck.
No. And I loved Chuck that episode, but Edgar Winter, he was out there with something to prove, I felt. He saw Chuck, he saw Muddy Waters, all of these legends, and I feel like, if I'm the younger guy performing with these guys, I really have to bring it. and man, everything he did. And then the Dying to Live, I mean, that was a change of pace. And I realized the first time I ever heard that was a Tupac sample. That's how strange the music world is. But I was like, how do I know all the lyrics to this song that I'm hearing for the first time on the show?
He played every type of keyboard you can imagine. He played a standard keyboard. He played the baby grand. Then he played one like it was a guitar around his neck. I didn't understand what it was.
Well, it was definitely something to remember. That's what it was.
Yeah.
And we have plenty of memories shared from all of you guys, which we love getting into every episode because that's kind of the heart of the show.
Absolutely. Without you fans, we don't have a show. We love when you send this up. Keep sending them in. Makes our job easier.
Well, Bob Walton, we've seen a few from you, and on our Bert episode, we appreciate all of your support. And you're right here with me, seeing Back to the Future as a 10-year-old, and the great rendition of Johnny Be Good that Michael J. Fox did. He went from Chuck Berry to Eddie Van Halen in about 3 minutes of ripping guitar solo. Still, that soundtrack was a portal to discover Chuck Berry for me and a whole generation of kids. I soon had a few Chuck Berry tapes and played them all the time. You sound like you had a childhood kind of close to mine, Bob.
I know. I have Chuck Berry's 28 Great. I still listen to it constantly. Rick Softy, 609, hosting the movie premiere of Hail Hail Rock and Roll and being Chuck's roadie in 1987 Century City, California. He played live in the movie theater lobby with everyone watching in awe. Keith, Wolfman Jack, Etta, Waddy Watchell, all standing behind me winking. There's a lot more to mention, but I'll end there for now. Oh my God. Pinch yourself that wasn't a dream. I can only imagine the movie's fantastic. To imagine staying there live and watching that. It's incredible.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that one, Rick. I wish you had some pictures, but I feel like you were probably working and not allowed to do that.
You don't want Chuck swinging his guitar at you.
Yeah, that too. Eric Walker, I was lucky to be able to see him perform at Magic Mountain in the mid-'80s. My 2-year-old fell asleep, but his older brother and mother and I had a great time.
Oh, that little kid's probably wishing he remembers that show. He's probably telling that story like, when I was 2 years old, I saw Chuck Berry. That's how cool I am.
He's got an older brother saying, you were sleeping.
Wootsy 64. My dad took me to see him in Binghamton, New York when I was about 12. It was my first concert. What an unforgettable night. If you're going to have your first concert, it might as well be the godfather of rock and roll.
So, what was your first concert that you were ever taken to? And like first, like as a kid, not like your first one you chose, but first time being in a big music venue like that.
You know, I honestly don't remember. I don't think I went to one with my parents like that.
I think I remember seeing Tim McGraw as a
that's
little
pretty
kid.
cool.
I think I was taken as a birthday. And then I want to say I saw like maybe Travis Tritt or someone at like a county fair type thing or one of those country type singers, something like that. But yeah, a couple country singers coming through Central Illinois. I want to say was my first. All right, well, Lizzie Rock 23. I was greatly gifted with the opportunity to see Chuck Berry, Little Richard, and Jerry Lee Lewis in the 90s at Concord Pavilion in Northern California. I hate to report that Berry was in a surly mood and threatened to walk off stage when he saw the venue's cameras for the field's big screens. He angrily ordered the cameras off or he'd walk. I don't think he understood that people in the back needed to see it. It was amazing seeing a then living legend in person, even if he was grumpy.
Yeah, I mean, that really is kind of the big three. You know, it's one of the big, in the top 5 of who invented rock and roll. So what a show.
Yeah. And I could see way back then nervous about people recording all of your stuff because you just don't know where it's going to go, what it's going to do. And especially if you're watching your pocketbook, you're like, hey, you're going to take that recording and sell it, and they're not going to need me to perform live now.
Yeah, exactly. And, you know, Chuck's from before they had those cameras. Like, they don't need to see me. They just need to hear the rock and roll. You know, there was no big screens when Chuck was doing originally in the 50s.
Right. All you needed was a guitar and an amplifier, and you're just ready to rock.
Absolutely. There's, I'm pro Chuck. Nelly 824. I love the performance of Johnny Be Good with Chuck Berry and Bruce Springsteen in the E Street Band. Bruce Springsteen was totally starstruck with Chuck's musical ability.
Nice. Yeah, and thinking back to that last question, I can also imagine if there's a bunch of screens and it's a big thing, that allows people to not be up close and personal. And from comedy, you don't want a venue where everyone's spread out and far away from you. You want that energy. You want the people close. You want them in the pit.
Right. Well, I also remember doing comedy when pre-internet, when people would explain to us, no, your shows, we're recording you because we're going to put it on the internet. And we're like, what? We don't want to do that. We were such naive back then.
Well, now you need the internet. You need the internet for your audience, all the support you get. You need the internet so you can sell merch. You can get our merch at our Shopify store. Link in the description. It helps us keep this podcast going. It'll help us get more guests on in the future.
Yeah, we have tons of great merch. As you can see behind me, the t-shirts, the hats, the mugs, DVDs, all right there. So hook it up. You can become a YouTube member for $4.99 to see the Midnight Special episodes every Monday morning. Join us for the live chat on Friday nights for the weekly episodes of the Midnight Special. I know that's a blast.
I'm there every Friday moderating the chat. And I say moderating as if there's any moderation to be done. But everyone is so friendly and great to be there. And if you think we have some facts, go ask your questions to the chat room and you'll get all sorts of facts. And I'm sure some of you guys are watching and supporting us right now. We love you. We appreciate you. And thanks so much.
And really, thanks for sending in all your submissions. We really love reading them and all the positive vibes. If you have something negative to say, we just want to hear it. So send them all to us at the Midnight Special Podcast at gmail.com or message us on social media. This was a super fun episode. Everybody, go back and watch episode 40. Chuck Berry killing it. Johnny Winter killing it. Fleetwood Mac, the original, and of course, the great Muddy Waters. I had a blast. Mike, thank you for everything. Bird Sugarman, thank you for everything. This is Joe Bartnick. We'll see you next week.